Hi everybody, Keith Tanner here from Flyin Miata, and today I'm going to talk about exhausts. I'm not going to cover every possible thing there is to know exhaust because, like brakes, it's one of those areas that's surprisingly deep when you get into it, but I'm going to touch some of the high points. If you are watching this live and you have questions during the video, please do put them in the comments. We will do our best to answer them either directly in the comments or I'll answer them in the video. If you're watching this in the future, please put them in the comments. We do read all the comments. We will respond to you as best we can. If you do enjoy this sort of content, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, make sure to like the videos. That helps us. It helps get our videos out to a larger number of people. It helps you because you get to find out when we're doing videos. Everybody wins, costs you nothing, so please do that. Go ahead and click away. Okay, so exhausts. Can I have an exhaust, please? There we go. Or in this case, specifically a muffler. I'm going to talk about some of the design aspects of exhaust systems, things to look at when you are purchasing an exhaust system. What's interesting about this one in particular, I did a whole video on these. We'll even fire up a car so you can get a chance to hear it running. But yeah, today exhausts. So, make sure I've got everything going on here. Engines are air pumps. They suck air in, then they squirt in a bit of fuel, set stuff on fire, and then they have to get rid of that exhaust out the back. And they make noise as part of this because there's a explosion, a controlled explosion effectively inside every cylinder. So there's a lot of noise involved too. So the exhaust system has to not only take those exhaust gases out of the exhaust system, or out of the head, the combustion chamber, as efficiently as possible, it also has to muffle that noise as well so that you are not a poor neighbor, shall we say. Now, Dr. Ulrich at Audi Sport, back when Audi was completely dominating Le Mans, their cars were very, very quiet. The early years of the turbo diesel Audis dominating Le Mans, they were extraordinarily quiet. And his statement at that point was the noise is just wasted energy. Fair enough, I can get behind that. We have built a race car as well in the past that was extraordinarily quiet. When I heard a Porsche 962 running at the Midi a few years ago, it was the same sort of thing. All you could hear was basically the turbocharger. You couldn't really hear any exhaust noise. Noise is not power, but it's fun. I mean, we all put baseball cards on our bicycle spokes when we were kids, or whatever it is that the modern youth of today do. They put iPods in their scooters to make exhaust noises. I don't know what they do, but you know what I mean. It's a fun. Keen's laughing over there because he's about 12 years old. He understands. It's a fun thing. You want your sports car to have a little bit of personality, a little bit of growl, a little bit of noise. So that's great. We'll talk a little bit about some of the aspects of that, and we'll also talk about some of the performance aspects as well, because the choice of exhaust can affect performance. So first I'm going to talk about a couple of aspects, a couple of points in here. Travis, you want to follow me underneath the car? It's high enough, you still don't have to watch your head. All Miatas have effectively two-piece exhaust system, well, three-piece exhaust system. The first is the exhaust manifold that takes it directly from ports to a flange about here. In this particular case, this car is turbocharged. It's a turbocharger downpipe, but there's always an exhaust manifold section. We're not going to talk about headers today. We're not going to talk about that part because that's a deep, interesting area that's a little bit outside the scope of this talk. The next section has a catalytic converter in it. There's sometimes a catalytic converter in this first section as well. In fact, there is in most Miatas by this point. But there's a section with the catalytic converter, and then there is the actual muffler itself. On an NA, the catalytic converter is just a piece of pipe that's this long. It's only just a cat. And then there's another pipe that goes all the way to the tailpipe. In every Miata built after 1999, after 98 probably, there's the cat is effectively 6 feet long. It's a midpipe. So if you see references to a catalytic converter, a midpipe, that's what we're talking about. The midpipe is, in this case, it goes all the way from this flange to this flange, which is about the same as every NB and NC and ND, this is ND that we're under here right now. The midpipe effectively takes the place of a catalytic converter in an NA Miata. So when we talk about a cat or a catback exhaust, it's basically everything after that last flange, wherever that flange might be. Make sense? I hope so. All right, Travis, you can get up off the ground now if you want to. And then, of course, after our midpipe or catalytic converter, we have the muffler itself, which in this case, we didn't plan this very well, is hidden underneath a diffuser. But here we go. Whoops, it's upside down. Here we go. This is what you're missing. There's one of these underneath there. So that's where the muffler sits. And the muffler is responsible for the majority of the sound control. Not purely, because the catalytic converter has some effect on sound level, and there's often a resonator in the mid-pipe as well, like there is right here on the NA from the factory. There's one in the long pipe that runs up to the Cat. So resonators take care of certain frequencies, and then the muffler generally deals with overall sound levels. So why would you want to upgrade it? Well, we get back to the bicycle card and the spokes of the bicycle, or the playing card and the spoke of the bicycle again. It makes a fun noise. You like to have that little nice growl. And that's the #1 reason that people change their exhaust systems, is just to get one that sounds better. And this is where it can be a challenge, because depending on what else you've done to your car, it may change the sound characteristics. I once put a header on my 1.6 Miata. I forget what I had for exhaust system at the time, but the header changed the sound so drastically that it changed my opinion of how I liked the sound of the car. I didn't like it very much afterwards. I had to do some things to make this header sound better. This header's not available on the market anymore, so don't worry about what it was specifically, but I ended up wrapping it in asbestos or whatever that cloth tape is to sort of stop the ringing that I was getting from the thin wall. Anyway, even a header, every single part of it has an effect. So when you are looking for sound clips online, be aware of that a lot of stuff that is done to the car will affect the actual exhaust note. One of the things you've got to watch for in just about every exhaust, but specifically the NA and the NB, is drone. And that's where you get basically a resonance at a certain engine speed. And the NA and the NB have a tendency to drone right at about the engine speed that you get on the highway. So everything's fine, you run around town, you get the top down, it's all fun, it makes nice little blatty noises, and then you go on the highway with the top up on a road trip, and your ears fall out because it's just going wah the entire time. So there's a lot of sound engineering has to go into a muffler system to make sure that you can get away from things like those drones. That's where you want to watch out when you're buying budget exhaust systems from vendors that are not specialists. Be aware of those, be cautious of those, because they haven't done the engineering, they haven't driven the cars, they've just come up with something that fits okay, and then they stuck a muffler or a tip on there that they could do a cool titanium color change on, and they sell it on eBay for super cheap. You put it on, your ears fall out, and you're unhappy. So I would strongly recommend that if you are looking at a muffler system for your Miata or a sound system, make sure that it's one that comes from a reputable vendor that has actually spent some time engineering the sound levels and the sound quality of your car. Mazda famously spent hundreds and hundreds, well, thousands of hours probably fine-tuning the stock exhaust note on the NA Miata, and they'll show you all sorts of frequency charts. We're not going to get that deep today, but they'll show you all sorts of frequency charts that shows the various peaks and what sounds good and multiples of frequencies. Some interesting stuff, but we're not going to get to that today. Basically, watch out for the cheap stuff, because cheap and nasty sounds cheap and nasty because it's nasty. Do we have any questions over there, guys? Not yet?
Lots of jokes.
Lots of jokes. Good. Lots of jokes. So this is an interesting system that we have on this car, and on this other ND we're doing as well. And this is the Flyin Miata Hush-o-Matic. This is an active exhaust for Miata. And this is a way that you can get multiple sound levels without having to compromise. Here, I'll bring this over here so you can zoom in on this, Travis. I did a whole video on these a while back. But the key is basically this butterfly that opens up a secondary exhaust path when you want the loud noise. It closes and runs through the full canister when you're looking for a quiet noise. And the benefit to this is, again, nice comfort level when you're driving long trips, and lots of noise and minimum restriction when you want it. Should we fire this up? Someone want to come over here and start this for me? Volunteer. Keys are in it. Do we have it set for loud or quiet right now, Travis? Set for quiet. Okay. Yeah, just let idle there for a second. So this is the Hush-o-Matic. It's set on the quiet setting right now. I don't know if you can hear this because I've got the microphones. Nick, can you turn it to the loud setting? There we go. Do you hear that? All of a sudden you turned on the bass. It's very noticeable from where I am. And back again. There we go. That's the butterfly opening and closing. That's the sort of sound level difference you can get with that little butterfly. And we've done some other videos that show them on the road if you want to hear that as well. You can go ahead and kill that. We've done some other videos that show the effect of that on the road, but it's a nice way to have sort of a dual function exhaust for your Miata. And one of the questions we get is, when are we going to release this for other Miatas as well? And we're looking at it. We're looking at the packaging. We're trying to figure out the way to make it work without making it crazy expensive. And here I'm going to do a little segue. If you're still watching, Flyin Miata is hiring. We are actually looking for another member of our R&D team. We're looking for a mechanical engineer because we have more projects than we have engineers at the moment. And that will help us unlock things such as active exhaust for other Miatas. So if you are a mechanical engineer who wants to come work in beautiful Western Colorado and work on the next generation of cool Miata parts, we will put a link in the description as to how you can do that, how you can come join our team and build stuff like cool exhaust systems. It really is as much fun as it sounds. Although being an engineer, you know it's going to spend some time screwing around with CAD. That's the nature of the beast. So one of the questions we do get is, we've talked about the actual sound deadening qualities or sound qualities of exhaust, which is the number one reason why people do it. But does it affect performance? And the answer is yes, the exhaust system can definitely affect performance. Basically, that restriction you get, once you get past the collector of the header, once you get to that flange that we were looking at earlier, there's no benefit to restriction. So you want the lowest restriction exhaust you can get. There's a point of diminishing returns. Running a 4-inch diesel exhaust on an NA Miata with a stock engine is probably not going to get you a whole lot over a 2¼ inch system because there's effectively no resistance by that point. However, if you are turbocharged, or if you are chasing the last little bit of power, there is definitely some power gains to be found. And I've got a chart here. So I have a screenshot that's going to be shown on a video, through a phone, all sorts of stuff. This is, if you go to our website and you look up the Hush-o-Matic, and I think our Midpipe for the ND as well, you'll find this dyno graph. And this is a comparison of, the red line is a stock ND. I think it's actually this stock ND. And then the blue line is we put our Hush-o-Matic on it, and you can see it increased some power, gained a little bit in the top end, and then we attached our Midpipe as well as the Hush-o-Matic, and that's the yellow line. And you can see right there, it picked up a significant amount of power. Peak went from 167 to 183, which is pretty darn healthy. And you can see there's a gain in torque throughout the range. Basically, yes, there was a performance increase. There was no retuning involved there. These cars are smart enough, they don't need to be retuned just because you change an exhaust. That was simply, we bolted it on. We had to take it off the dyno to bolt the new parts on, but if we could have bolted them on the dyno, that's equivalent. Those were all tested on the same day, back to back, on the same dyno, same test. So those are great A to B. So there is definitely power to be gained, but there's a limitation to how much power you can gain, if that makes sense. You know, if we'd gone to a complete straight pipe, a complete open pipe with absolutely no muffling exhaust, it probably would not have changed again from that peak number because we'd removed all the meaningful restrictions. And when you are looking at restrictions, you do want to look at the biggest restriction. There's no point in putting a wide open muffler on if you have a very restrictive midpipe in place, or if you have a catalytic converter that's failed and is blocking the pipe. Putting a loud muffler on is not going to improve that failed cat. Along those lines, we also get questions about, are high-flow cats worth it? Do they actually have a power improvement? And again, it comes down to where is the weak point in the system? Where is the area of most resistance? A stock cat on a stock Miata doesn't offer a whole lot of resistance compared to a restriction compared to the rest of the system. There's very little gain to be found, generally speaking, by just replacing a cat on an otherwise stock car. The main reason to do that is because your existing cat has failed. If you are making more power, if you're running a turbocharger, for example, at that point we start seeing some actual power improvements. They're not enormous, could be 5 horsepower, but there is something there as you gradually work your way through the system. Just be aware that there are different levels of aftermarket cats. A free flow cat generally has, cats are built on like a honeycomb core. There's a matrix in there that is covered in precious metals, and that's what performs the actual catalytic reaction that, if you remember your high school chemistry, is changing one chemical effectively into another, one molecule into another. I was better at physics than I was at chemistry, but you get the idea. Catalyst is an actual chemistry term. A high-flow cat generally has that same matrix, but it's more open. It has more space. The cells are bigger, more space between the pieces of matrix. I don't have a piece of cat matrix here handy, unfortunately. But that more open cat design also means there's less surface area, and so it's less effective at actually catalyzing. So you might have more problems with things like check engine lights. I know the Mazdaspeed Miata, for example, is very sensitive to having the right catalytic converter in the downpipe. If you put in one that is a little too free flow, a little too open, it will start throwing check engine lights. So you do have to watch for that. That is one possible downside to a catalytic converter to going for a free flow. You'll also find that different states have different requirements for what you're allowed to exchange. Colorado, for example, you have to use basically an OE level, OE quality cat, one that's got a California exemption number on it. California also, of course, the same. Much of New York, depending on the model years. I forget some other states as well. And those are cats that perform at the same level as factory, as opposed to the federal cats, which are allowed to perform a little bit worse. So you got a little bit more leeway there. The federal cats tend to be less expensive, partly because of the certification process, but also because they have fewer amounts of those precious metals in them. And they are literally precious metals. The reason that tweakers steal catalytic converters, there's a lot of money in one of those things. So they're more expensive because they have more, the DO ones are more expensive because they have more actual precious metals in them. Any questions going on over there, Kian? Nope. Let me see if I have anything else in the previous list. Cat question, should I delete my cat? Don't delete your cat. It'll make your car stink. Your car will complain because unless it's an early NA, it will be monitoring those cats. There's very little improvement to be gained in terms of power. Don't delete your cat. Cats are nice things to have. What to look for? Oh, special hardware. What special hardware can you recommend for exhaust and flanges so they don't get rusted and stuck? I will get the secret to that. Anti-seize. This is your friend. If you live in the northern climates, the Northeast in particular, you should know this stuff already. I'm using a rag because if this stuff gets in your fingers, you'll end up looking like the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. It'll stick to everything, but that's its job, is to get on all of the fasteners, all the nuts and all the threads, and make sure that they don't seize, thus the name. This is a shop-sized bucket of the stuff. If you are an individual and you buy this, you will pass it on to your grandchildren. You don't need anywhere near this much. But this is the stuff. If you want to keep your exhaust system from sticking, that's the stuff to use. You can use stainless fasteners, but they have a tendency, they can gall on you, which can be problematic as you try to take them off in the future because they're seeing a lot of heat. So that's the secret right there. Is louder always better? Depends how much you like your neighbors. Remember that louder is not speed. So louder is louder. That might be better, that might be worse, depends what you're looking for, but louder is just louder. That's all it is. Yeah. That's about all I have here at on here. There's questions on here about will exhaust give you any real horsepower boost? I think we talked about that a little bit. The tune is not really necessary to take advantage of the exhaust. It's not that big a change. These cars are so smart. They're monitoring everything. They can make the adjustments you need to. Gains from a tune are sort of independent from an exhaust. There are some people who think you need to retune the cars every time the sun goes behind a cloud. Really, they're far more intelligent than that. So I am going to mention a couple of things about Flyin Miata exhausts. I'm going to make you guys go down to the floor here because this is heavy. I'm not going to pick it up and play with it. All of our exhausts are made here in the States. They're actually made in California. They're all made of stainless steel, and they all carry a lifetime warranty, with the exception of the catalytic converters, and that's the warranty that comes from the actual manufacturer. I forget the specific details on the catalytic converter warranty. The internals are rated or are guaranteed for I think 5 years or so, and the body is guaranteed for a certain amount of time. That's because we don't make the cats at that facility, but everything else does have a lifetime warranty. So if you do have a Hush-o-Matic and something happens to the butterfly system, haven't seen it happen yet. That's an OE level part, the same sort of the same manufacturer, I believe, who does like Audi and Lamborghini. I don't think we've seen one fail. But if there's, say, a weld crack, that sort of thing, we'll take care of that. And we also design them to make sure they don't crack. So, for example, we've got this nice big gusset on here that takes the strain off this particular joint. And of course, it's completely unnecessary, but they're all beautifully polished. You may never see it again, but I mean, check this out. How can you turn that down? And just so you don't forget, they do say Flyin Miata on the tips, just so we don't forget. But that's what sets the Flyin Miata exhausts apart, is basically that lifetime warranty, that complete stainless steel construction. They're not warranted against rusting out, but the stainless steel, of course, is there to sort of protect that. And rusting out is unlikely to happen because of the material. We have a question back there. What's your question?
If you had to pick, where to start, would you do header or midpipe or muffler first?
If I had to pick where to start, would I start with the header, the midpipe, or the muffler? I would start with the muffler because that is the greatest restriction from factory. It's also the one that's going to give you the biggest sound change, this biggest sound difference. And I mean, as we discussed, that's probably why you're changing it anyway. This is going to be the most rewarding. After that, headers get a little sticky, especially on the later cars because in the NC and the ND, they have cats in them. And it's very difficult to find a header that retains the catalytic converter. It's federally illegal to remove a catalytic converter. That's why we don't sell catless headers. And also the car will get quite upset about having one of its cats taken away. It's there for a reason. Don't think with the header. On the earlier cars, the NAs and most of the NBs, it would probably depend on the health of my cat, whether I change the midpipe or the header first. Yeah, but the number one thing would be the muffler system, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. Another follow-up question, Mike.
Rubber or poly bushings, and do they matter and do they help?
So the question is about rubber or poly bushings, and that's the bushings that actually hang the exhaust. I don't know if we can see one in here. I'll put this aside so you don't step on it, Travis. Doink. So the exhaust, because it's attached to the car, or because it's attached to the engine moves around, and because it is getting hot, it expands and contracts. So these are not solidly mounted to the car. If you solidly mount one, it's going to crack somewhere. So they're hung off. This is a factory rubber donut right here. They're hung off these exhaust hangers. And those do go with time. They will eventually fail. The exhaust will start to droop down. Will start to bang on things. This one's obviously still in quite good shape, and that's a factory one. The poly ones will last longer, and they keep the exhaust under tighter control, which if you are running a large diameter exhaust, it becomes more important because you start losing your margin of error because you go down here, it gets closer to everything. So that's the entire purpose of running poly hangers. The only downside to poly hangers is that they're very difficult to get off. I've run them on a few of my cars in the past. I think I have them on my track car. But if I ever have to remove them, it is a fight to get those things off. Just because they don't flex enough. They don't flex very well to get off, which is kind of the point. But that's the only downside I have. So poly or rubber, that would be my choice depending on, I would probably use factory rubber unless I needed the extra exhaust control, and then I would go for the poly to keep it in place. Not a lot of downsides to the poly other than the difficulty of getting them off. Any more questions there, Mike? You gave me a thumbs up. I don't know if that's a yes or a no.
We're pretty well covered.
Okay, we're pretty well covered? All right. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what to look for in exhaust, give you a little bit of background information on it, on what you might want to take into consideration when you're shopping for a new exhaust for your Miata. Oh, one question we did have is duals versus singles, is one better? The main reason you see dual exhaust is because of the association with muscle cars. V8s tend to run dual exhaust systems because they'll basically run one for each bank of the exhaust. So they've got separate mufflers for each side. They'll join them together in the middle usually, but the entire purpose of the dual exhaust is as much flow as possible, because when you're making 500 horsepower, a 2.5-inch pipe single won't cut it anymore. So that's where the whole concept of dual exhaust come from. Mazda used dual exhaust from the factory on the NC, of course. On the ND, the stock exhaust is a dual tip, I think. Yeah, it's been a while since I saw one with a stock exhaust on it. It's the insinuation of power. Doesn't really make any difference on the sort of power levels we're talking about. You've only got one bank of cylinders to start with if you're running a 4-cylinder Miata. So it's unlikely to make any difference. It's almost purely style. If you are running a V8 Miata like the one in my garage, then yes, there's definitely a performance advantage on that one. But yeah, that's an outlier. Mike, you have your hand up again.
Hey, speaking of diameters, how do you measure exhaust diameter? ID? OD?
So the question is, speaking of diameters, how do you measure exhaust diameter? Is it the outer diameter or the inner diameter? And it's the outer diameter of the pipe. When you're talking about a 2.5-inch pipe, 2.5 exhaust, that means that this pipe is 2.5 inches on the outside. The diameter on the inside depends on the wall thickness, how thick that tube is. And that's the nature of tubing. Tubing is always measured on the OD, as I think pipe is measured on the ID, if I remember correctly. But this is tubing. So a 2.5-inch exhaust will be 2.5 inches on the outside. So if you do get your exhaust and you measure the inside of the pipe and it's not the number you think it should be, that's why. Anything else?
Asking about power levels for different diameters, but they're a little open-ended.
Yeah, power levels for different diameters. There's not going to be a hard line where all of a sudden, at this point, this is the biggest exhaust you'll ever need. Yeah, the more power you make, the larger the cross-section of the exhaust you want. And is there a point where this just doesn't work? Can you run 200 horsepower through a stock exhaust? Yes, you can. Can you run a 2.5-inch pipe on a stock Miata, a stock NA Miata? You can. Will it show a power increase? A little bit. Will it make a noise, more noise? Definitely. It depends on what you're looking for. But there's no hard line where all of a sudden it just stops working or it stops improving or it doesn't work anymore. Mike, you again.
Can you have too big an exhaust?
Can you have too big an exhaust? Not really. I mean, you get packaging problems, you get into weight problems, you get into availability problems, but there's not really a functional downside to running too big other than the weight and the clearance and the likelihood you're going to bang on something. And of course, there's always sound quality comes into it as well. Mike, you again.
Do you want to talk about back pressure?
I did mention back pressure, Mike. Basically, there's no real benefit to back pressure once you get past the collector of the header. And that's where the individual tubes for the exhaust collector come together. I don't have a header here to show you. But once you get past that collector and you're back to the single pipe, there's really no benefit to back pressure. I know there's some old school thinking about this, about A series engines out of classic minis and stuff like this, where they run little tiny pipes hoping to get more torque, I think, out of extra back pressure. But you're going to generally find that, no, you get rid of restriction, power, performance goes up. It's all good. Mike.
What about material? Can you talk about different types of exhaust pipe material?
Different types of exhaust pipe material. Well, your two basic choices are stainless steel and mild. That's what it comes down to. I'm sure there's some stuff out there, some titanium. Yeah, you don't want to try to weld titanium, let me tell you. You're not going to be able to fix that one in a local muffler shop. The main difference is stainless steel is more resistant to rust. And most exhaust systems rust from the inside out. Because what happens is when you first fire up your exhaust, there's not enough. Water is a byproduct of combustion. Again, we're back in high school. This time it's, I guess, probably still chemistry, isn't it? But water is a byproduct of combustion. And if your exhaust system is cold, that water will condense on the exhaust system, and basically it'll end up sitting in there. That's why when you start a cold car, especially in the winter, you'll sometimes see water dribbling out of the pipes. That water that doesn't get out of the pipes stays in the system, and especially if you just do short drives, it doesn't evaporate, and it starts rusting it from the inside out. So that's why you want a stainless steel exhaust, if possible, as opposed to mild steel. Mild steel is cheaper, it's easier to weld. If you're doing a custom exhaust, then it's a lot easier to put together. If you're building a car that won't be run cold a whole lot, if you're building a race car that is going to be fired up in the pits, it's going to run hard, it's going to make lots and lots of heat in the exhaust over the course of the day. You're not just driving down to the 7-Eleven to get a Slurpee, turning it off, driving home, turning it off. You can get away with mild, no problem. If you're looking at a street car that's liable to see a wide variety of usage and you want to keep it for a long time, like one of these, then I would strongly recommend stainless steel as a choice, and especially in the muffler, because that's where you get the most condensation because it's got the most surface area. Anything else, Mike? We may have stumped him.
Doing pretty good.
We're doing pretty good. All right. I'm going to call it there. If you do have more questions about this sort of thing, please do throw them in the comments. We'll do our best to answer them in the future. Or you can contact our customer service team who would be happy to help you out. We have a legion of Miata experts sitting, waiting to answer your phone calls, emails, Facebook messages, YouTube comments. I don't know how else do they get in touch with us. Yeah, any way you can get in touch with us. Smoke signals, carrier pigeons, whatever. We'll do our best to answer it in the manner of which it was delivered. So again, if you like this, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to like this video, get the word out, and we'll be back next week with something else. This is Keith Tanner from Flyin Miata saying thanks for watching.